start by introducing myself. My name is Shane, and I will be the moderator for the evening. This event is being co-hosted by the League of Women Voters, Morgantown, Monongalia County, as well as Mountaineers for Progress. Can we please give the League and Mountaineers for Progress a round of applause for hosting the evening? So you're not here to see me talk, you're here to see the candidates talk, and we're going to get to that in about 2 minutes. But first, I just want to lay out a schedule of events for this evening. We have 7 candidates that are here tonight, 5 from the Democratic side, 2 from the Republican side. I'll go through and introduce them in a minute. Candidates are going to have 2 minutes for their opening statements, and then we have a series of prepared questions that the candidates have not seen in advance. We will be asking those questions. Candidates will have 60 seconds per question to respond. It is a forum, not a debate, so there are no rebuttals, no follow-ups. It's just you speak your position and we move on to the next candidate. All of you have cards in front of you and hopefully some pens as well. If you want to submit questions to us, we will hopefully get to the audience portion of the event. And who's collecting cards again? Please raise your hands. Right back there. So there are 2, maybe 3 hands I see. They are collecting cards. If you have a card, just hold it up. They'll be looking for you. And they'll be collecting the cards, and I'm bringing those up here once we move to the portion of the night where we take questions from the audience. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. Oh, and then at the end, we'll give candidates 30 seconds apiece for closing statements. So 2 things here. I would ask for candidates to be mindful of time because we do have a lot of people that want to ask questions, and we also are lucky enough to have a large number of candidates here. Audience, we also do ask that this is a time for us to listen instead of being heard, although if you do want to participate, we do have, like I said, those cards going around where we can hopefully get your question on the agenda. Our target time to wrap up is 8 o'clock. There is a margin of error there, but we do want to be respectful to everybody's time, and we're not going to plan to be here until 8:30 or 10 or 11, as much as maybe we would like to do that. So candidates, in alphabetical order by party, we have Barbara Evans-Fleischauer, Evan Hansen, Rodney Piles, Danielle Walker, John Williams, Cindy Fritsch, and Roger Shuttlesworth. All right, and with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so question 1. The teacher's work stoppage stole the spotlight this legislative session.
Intros.
Oh.
It's okay. You ready?
Yes, candidate introductions. I am so sorry. I'm inspiring confidence here. I guess let's just start with Barbara Fleischauer.
Thank you, Shane. And I also want to extend a big thank you to the Mountaineers for Progress and the League of Women Voters and to this wonderful audience. I have never been to a forum so well attended. So something worked. My name is Barbara Evans-Fleischauer, and I am a current member of the West Virginia House of Delegates. I'm a Democrat. I've been in for a long time, and I think that is an asset. I think experience helps. It's a 60-day session. If you want to get something done, which I do, you have to move very, very quickly. A bill has to get through both houses of the legislature. It has to be heard by 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 committees in order to become law. And so there are tricks. There are things you have to do to move things quickly. And I hope that I have the experience to do that. My slogan is fighting for fairness, getting things done. And I think that reflects my legislative career. I think that we have to work on fairness issues. We have a ways to go on that, and there are a lot of fairness issues. And but I also think that it's really important that the legislature does things, and I hope does good things. So I hope you will consider keeping me in office. I want to be there. I think I can represent you. I think I'm responsive to the community, and I look forward to answering questions this evening.
My name is Evan Hansen, and I am running for House of Delegates because when I look at DC and Charleston, I see dysfunction. I think that now, more than ever, we need principled and thoughtful leaders. And I am a scientist, I'm a small business owner, and I'm not in office right now. I'm running to try to shake things up. I'm an environmental scientist, and that means that I like to apply facts and evidence to issues that I'm concerned about. There's a lot of lawyers and lobbyists down in Charleston. There's not a lot of scientists. There's not a lot of facts and evidence being applied to issues that are very important to you and me. I mentioned also that I'm a small business owner. I started a business 21 years ago here in Mon County and have grown it to what it is today. We have 16 employees, most of whom work here in Morgantown. And many of those employees grew up here in West Virginia and went to WVU. And it's great, I think, that we've been able to keep them here in West Virginia. But many of the employees have moved here from out of state, and they live here and they love it here just like I do. The types of issues I'm concerned about, number one, is public education. I was on the picket lines with the teachers. I'm glad that the teachers and the public employees got those raises. They're well deserved, and there's more that we need to do. Second issue is roads and infrastructure. I'm glad that Mon County voted for the road bond and that we're going to start to see some results soon. But not everybody on this stage is in support of the road bond. In fact, Cindy Fritsch is opposing it. And unless our local leaders are working together, Democrat and Republican, on those roads issues, we're not going to see the investment that we need to see from the State Department of Highways.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thanks to the League of Women Voters and the MFP for sponsoring this event. I'm Rodney Piles. I'm serving my first term in the House of Delegates and running for re-election, but most of you may know me for my previous service to the county, serving 24 years as your county assessor, the longest serving assessor in the history of the county. But prior to that, I was Director of Archives and History for the state of West Virginia in the Rockefeller administration. I served 5 years at the WVU Library as an assistant curator, and I taught 2 years at Alderson Broaddus College. So with that background, I have to say that serving in the House of Delegates has been the most enjoyable experience of my life, and I would like to go back for another term to continue to serve and advocate for the people that do not have a voice, the poor and the working poor and the minorities, and others in that situation. So I have the endorsement of the AFL-CIO and the UMWA. Like Evan, I have stood on picket lines with the gas workers, the teachers, and the CWA, and so I want to continue to work and fight and advocate for the working families, and hope that I can serve another term. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Danielle Walker. I want to thank Mountaineers for Progress and also the National League of Women Voters for gathering everyone in this room today. And we're gathered because we want change, and that time is now. I am a working mother of Dimitri and Devin Walker. I am a Mountaineer who wants to be the voice of the voiceless by listening to our community. I will bring the voice of the common people to the government. I am a partner family with Mon County Habitat for Humanity, and I work with the Development Committee, and I'm also a family advocate and a volunteer. Being a homeowner in a safe, affordable neighborhood is a hand up. That has shown growth in my family, financially, educationally, and spiritually. That's a hand up, not a handout. It is using money we invest in taxes for good use, building our communities, There is a need that is so strong, and it's time that we expand affordable housing. In this state, the housing prices are at a crisis level for regular folks as myself. Young people leave college with $30,000 debt, and they can't afford a house. People living from check to check can't afford a huge house payment. The American dream is falling farther and farther from our grasp. Mon County, it's time for us to rebuild. We're going to rebuild with our educators. We're going to rebuild with our public service. Thank you, Danielle Walker.
Thank you so much to the MFP and to the League for having this event. I'm very appreciative. My name is John Williams. I was first elected to the House in 2016, and at that time I told you that I thought I would be a fighter for you in Charleston. And I feel very confident that I have proven to be a fighter over the course of my first term. To give you an example, I fought for medical cannabis in my first session, something that to me is nothing more than passion for our fellow West Virginia. When it came to the budget session, do you remember when the governor had his big coming out party with the President of the United States and said that he left the party because of certain Democrats? He then later said that he left the party because of 18 House Democrats that stood up against his budget, that balanced that budget on the back of hardworking people and gave kickbacks to big coal mining companies. I was one of those 18 House Democrats. I stood up to Jim Justice when he was a member of my own party. When I ran last session, I told you that a big reason for my running was because of my papaw, John Nelson. He was born into immense poverty in southern West Virginia. It's an all too common tale. And I also told you that that story is not one that's out of date. That story is still very much prescient to the goings on right now. They say that West Virginia is almost heaven. But I told you last time, it's not almost heaven for the child on a school bus who's wondering when they will have their next meal. It's not almost heaven for the West Virginia teacher who works far too hard for far too little pay. And it's not almost heaven for the West Virginia motorist who finds our country roads anything but smooth. But in my first term, every single roll call that came up for teacher pay raises, I was on the right side. In my first term, I sponsored a bill that experts are saying is going to be a lethal blow to food insecurity for children, the shared table bill. Look it up. It's going to change the game. In my first session, I worked hard to get the road bond passed, and we're about to see the first $800 million of $1.8 billion come into this community as a result of that. I have been a fighter for 2 years. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cindy Fritsch. Thank you for having us here. I thought Republicans, since we're not challenged, we're only going to have 2 minutes to introduce ourselves and not have questions, but when I arrived here, I was told we'll be participating in the questions. All I brought was blank pieces of paper and a pen. I am currently the chair of banking, which also means I'm on the insurance committee because it's banking and insurance. I'm the vice chair of legislative rulemaking and review. West Virginia has some oversight over rules that the agencies make. We're limited in how we can keep the agencies under control in the rules, but we do have some ability. I serve on the finance committee. I believe I've been very fiscally responsible on that committee, trying to guide this state through sins of the past and the war on coal, which busted our budget. We've had difficulty piecing together budgets, that's the truth. But because we created a sustainable budget last year that was continuing on as a sustainable budget for the upcoming year, we were able to give pay raises to state employees and to teachers and to freeze PEIA so that the premiums won't increase while there's determination where to move forward on that. We have a 60-day session. We're limited in what we can accomplish, but we've accomplished a great deal. I also serve on the newest member of the Health Committee. I replaced a delegate who was bumped up to the Senate with an appointment. I serve on the Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse Committee, which I was the lead sponsor last year of a bill that created the Office of Drug Control Policy, which deals with education and treatment. We've put a lot of money towards treatment. I support enforcement, education, and treatment. We need to move very hard to give people, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. We need to try to get them to drink, take the treatment, and improve their lives, because this drug epidemic is just devastating to West Virginia. I guess we don't have rebuttal time, I voted for the bill to allow folks to vote on the road bond. I ask questions all the time during session. I ask questions during the road bond. I'm sorry that asking questions is seen in such a negative light, because asking questions can solve problems, and we do have problems. Thank you.
Thank you for having me down tonight. My name is Roger Shuttlesworth. I'm on the Republican side of the ballot coming up in May. I'm here tonight because I want to represent you, the people of Montague County and Charleston. There's a lot of problems down in Charleston. We've had some colorful remarks already tonight that people are working for a lot of things down there. And on the other end of the table, Barbara's been there for many, many years serving the people of Montague County. Unfortunately, with all the effort that our politicians are making in Charleston, our roads aren't getting any better. Hopefully they will with this major budget bill that we passed. And I think that the key there is accountability. Accountability for our politicians, accountability for our Department of Highways, accountability for all those folks out there who are working for us on our political dollar. That's what I want to take to Charleston, is try to get some accountability in Charleston for our politicians, the people who work for us, the people of Montague County, the state of West Virginia, and hopefully we can work together and make this a better state. Montague County is very, very privileged. They are one of the financially best suited and best situated counties in the state of West Virginia. There's a lot of people in southern West Virginia and other parts of West Virginia are hard pressed to make a day's labor and have a good wage. I want to go down and fight for that, for jobs, for better wages for our teachers. The teachers are probably, for our future, for our children, make all the difference in the world. And if we can't give them a wage that benefits them and their families, they're not going to want to stay in West Virginia to take care of our children and give them a better education. Thank you for having me down tonight.
All right, candidates, thank you for your opening statements. And I realized that I was remiss. I neglected to mention something in the beginning of the forum. As you know, in this upcoming House of Delegates race, everybody in the 51st District will be able to vote in their own party's primary, or if you're an independent, depending on which ballot that you take. You can select up to 5 people from that party. On the Democratic side, there are a total of 6 candidates, so that means there will be 1 person who does not make it to the general election. Hello? Okay. On the Republican side, there are only 4 candidates, which means all 4 of those candidates will automatically move to the general election. And then you will have 5 Democrats and you have 4 Republicans that are going on the same ballot for those 5 seats. So I just want to offer some clarification. It is true that the Republicans are going to automatically move to the general. However, in the interest of fairness, everybody is being afforded time to speak, because that gives everybody a chance to really see what candidates are about. And it's a chance to learn more going into the general election, where you will be able to choose between the majority of the people on this stage. All right, so moving forward now, I guess I can get to the questions. Is that all right? Everybody gets 1 mulligan tonight, and that was mine, so you all have yours. The teachers' work stoppage stole the spotlight this legislative session. As a result of the stoppage, Governor Justice assembled a task force to address the need for a long-term solution to the Public Employees Insurance Agency, or PEIA. Specifically, how would you work to fix PEIA to provide equitable health insurance to the over 200,000 state employees that rely on it? I guess we started over there before, so Mr. Shuttlesworth, we'll start with you.
Very good question to start with. In order to fix that problem, we need money. And we need fairness for those employees that work for the state of West Virginia. I think that this strike brought to light a lot of problems in our education system. Not only are we underfunding and underpaying our teachers, but the benefits package they have, in some cases, they're struggling like everybody else in the state of West Virginia. I think it's a universal problem we all have. It's come to light for me and my family in the last year or so. It's very difficult if you're an older person like myself, or you have some medical problems underlying. If you lose your insurance, very difficult to find, and if you do find it, it's going to take 25 to 50% of your monthly or weekly income. So I think it's a universal problem. I think we need to find the dollars to address that problem. I really think that the committee should have an opportunity to investigate all the issues, all the possibilities, and somehow we as a state need to come up with a good and equitable way to address that problem.
Hi, I am a PEIA enrollee, and because I'm not married to someone who's in the government and has PEIA, I pay the employee match and I pay personally the employer match. So I pay 100% of the premium. But I chose PEIA because so many people in our community have PEIA, are going to the medical providers and have it, so I feel comfortable that I'm going to have the best shot at getting care when I need it, and I have needed some care. I would like to see what the task force plans to do. It's something we all need to think about seriously. PEIA is it's based on income. So some people that make less pay lower, and people that make more pay higher premiums. We have to consider, do we want to keep that? Also, we have an 80-20 match that I referred to earlier. Do we want to change that, make the government pay more of it? There's a lot of things to think of, as well as benefits. And 3 years ago, I believe it was, we put about 80 million extra into PEIA. We put extra in last year. This year, we put in 29 million more we've been doing. And this is under the, I hate to say it, my party. This was not happening prior to my party's taking over in the legislature. Thank you.
One myth that I'd like to dispel is the one that people seem to think that simply because there's a task force that means that it has any teeth to it whatsoever. The task force can scream and yell until they're blue in the face, but if they don't have a legislature who listens to their recommendations, it's not going to do a whole heck of a lot of good. And that's part of the problem. I think that we need a legislature who's not worried about the next election, who's not worried about raising revenues. West Virginia has one of the most regressive income tax systems in the whole country, meaning that a lot of our taxes are borne on the back of middle class, lower class people. We need to change that. We need to take bold steps. No one told me when I was running in 2016, hey, John, I want you to go down there and maintain the status quo for us, okay? That's not what it was. It was be bold. And a part of that boldness, I was on a bill to look at legalizing adult use cannabis, and 50% of that money would have gone towards fixing this whole PEI mess. We can't leave anything on the table. We got problems. We got to talk about it.
Being on the lines with those teachers, with the educators and the personnel, we have money in this state, but it's being put in the wrong pockets. It's being put in the wrong places. We have big companies that come in here and just suck us dry. We have educators that get the education, and the only thing they come out with is more bills. Their student loans, their medical care. Enough is enough. We put it back on the big companies. We tax them. That is our right. I will take a stand for PEIA. No more. We have enough. We will find the money, and the time is now. Thank you.
Well, as we've heard, the PEIA issue seems to be in a task force now, and we basically have to wait and see what. Basically, have to wait and see what comes from the task force. But
let me swap the microphones. Let's try that.
I paused your time, Rob.
It's not an improvement.
Okay, I guess I'll just have to flip on and off. Try that.
okay, and as we've heard, probably the basic solution to the problem is finding more revenue, and we've heard some ideas about that. Last year, the governor came to the legislature with some good ideas for revenue, which wouldn't be too painful for people. Increase in the tobacco tax, sugary drink tax, and various increases in the sales tax, anywhere from a third of a cent to a full cent. A half-cent increase in the sales tax would generate $100 million in income. And so those are some other things that we're probably going to have to look at, but we're going to have to wait for the task force.
My mom was a teacher, and I know how hard teachers work and how much they value their health insurance, just like we all do. especially teachers in West Virginia who are not paid fairly. So this PEIA issue is something that we absolutely need to address now, not just for teachers, but for service personnel and public employees all across the state. And what it's going to take is a stable funding source. And I think all options need to be on the table. A couple specific options to consider include perhaps increasing the severance tax on natural gas, especially now that natural gas production is set to boom in West Virginia. Let's take advantage of that boom. And another option that should be on the table is legalize marijuana, which has created a huge influx of revenue into states that have done that. We need to keep track of this task force, and if they come up with good ideas, we need to make sure the legislature implements them. And if they don't come up with good ideas, we need to take further action to solve this problem.
I'm Barbara Evans-Fleischauer, and I think that, I agree with Evan. I think everything needs, and probably most people, everything needs to be on the table. And I think we do need somebody to really study this issue and try to figure it out. I am very much in favor of increasing the cigarette tax. We have the #1 rate of pregnant moms smoking, and that is harmful to the mom and our children. And we are #1 in smoking generally. 4,200 people die early every year in just our state. So we would be solving a lot. I want to say for sure we need to remember the retirees because they can't work an extra job. They didn't get a raise. And I also think we need to think about the sugary drink tax and pooling our insurances to get efficiency, like PEIA, CHIP, Medicaid. They're all a little bit different. What can we do to maybe capitalize on that?
All right, so healthcare and health insurance being a hot topic, we do have one more on this subject. West Virginia was one of many states that used provisions in the Affordable Care Act to expand Medicaid coverage. As of March 2018, approximately 165,000 West Virginians, in other words, roughly 10% of our state's population, is covered as a result of these new provisions. Do you support this expansion? Why or why not?
We started, so Cindy?
Oh, this is
Work our
what
way
you're
down the
doing?
line.
Well, I serve on the Finance Committee, and this is a huge part of our budget, Medicaid. Not so much this portion. So I've been funding it. I'm a little concerned about how this would work out if there's changes moving forward, and if we'd have to fund 100% of this, but that's not a bridge that we've come to yet. Of course, the federal government put out a big incentive for states by offering to pay 90%. Usually Medicaid, we get a 75% match. This particular item for the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is at 90% at its lowest federal funding. So I'm currently working to fund what's there, but I don't know what's down the road, and we'll deal with that when we get to it. Thank you.
I guess the basic part.
We might need to turn off the microphones if you're not using them. They must be too close together.
Hopefully this will be better. I think a big part of my job as a delegate is to make sure that I don't have constituents who get sick and die because they can't have medical care. Okay? And when we're talking about these federal programs, they're matching dollars. When we leave dollars on the table, when we're not funding it, we are passing up free gold money from the federal government to take care of our people. So I think Medicaid funding has to be a priority of what we do. This past budget, it cut some backfills in Medicaid, but it didn't actually cut any services. Now, in the future, I don't think that we can afford to make any future cuts to Medicaid because it's just too important for lower income individuals, for people who need help in life, keeping their life.
Medicaid, my family's lifeline for my 2 children and also my mother that's a breast cancer survivor. So this is on the front line. This is something we must fund. Everyone needs health care. And it shouldn't be a vote, it should be a given. Who are you to say that someone should not survive because they cannot afford health care? Medicaid helps our addiction crisis because it's more than opioids. So if we're bringing in the opioids, then we make those big pharmas pay for our Medicaid if the federal government can't pay for it. Put the people before the politics. People before politics. Everyone deserves to go to the doctor. Everyone deserves to get medications. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to support Medicaid.
I definitely support the Medicaid expansion. I have a daughter who has benefited from that. She would not have health care without Medicaid. Again, it comes down to funding at the state level. The budgets that have been passed by the legislature the past few years, the bare bones budgets that have been passed with very, very minimal increases, and the main cuts have been made to education and health care. And so it comes down again to revenue, and the legislature has to be looking for new ways to raise revenue so that we do not have further cuts to health care.
Continuing the Medicaid expansion in West Virginia is a no-brainer to me. We've got huge healthcare needs in West Virginia. Unfortunately, we have very unhealthy populations. We're bringing in large amounts of federal matching dollars, which is benefiting our state. It's not just making people healthier, but it's helping our economy as well. It's allowing people to get jobs. It's allowing us to grow and diversify our economy. And Medicaid in West Virginia is also providing much needed funds to help address the opioid epidemic, to provide money for treatment that's needed so that people who are addicted to drugs are not treated as criminals, but they're treated with the appropriate medical care so that they could become productive members of society again.
I'm glad some people brought up the opioid crisis because it's something that really angers me. Our state's going into a tailspin, and it's because Big Pharma convinced physicians that it wasn't addictive. And so we have a lot of people in our state who have occupational injuries and got hooked on drugs, and now they are considered worthless people. And I think one of the cool things about Medicaid is all of our people have worth. I also think that the provisions in the Affordable Care Act that say you can't discriminate against women, you can't discriminate against people that have prior existing conditions are wonderful. I think for families that are people that are worried if they have cancer and they can now go to the doctor, $160,000 or $80,000 it may be, it's a miracle that they can find out how they're doing and they get treatment if they need it. So I strongly support Medicaid.
Okay, definitely a difficult question to try to address. We're not going to be able to raise taxes far enough to take care of everybody in the state of West Virginia. And you've heard a lot of comments here about raising taxes. Is there anybody in the room that wants to raise their taxes? Everybody?
Yeah.
Glad to see you volunteer, because it looks like the group of politicians at this table are going to raise your taxes. The problem we have in West Virginia and everywhere across this country is accountability. I talked about it before. I work in EMS. I've worked in EMS for 42 years. And I've seen a lot of people that are sick, a lot of people that can't afford to go to doctors. It's not the system itself that's causing the problem. It's the politicians on the other end. They put the money where they want it. If they wanted to put more money toward Medicaid, they want to put more money toward PIA, it's a pie. They have to sort it out and put it to the highest priority project. And if we could come up with better funding and more funding, that would be great. Taxes is what's going to take, though, and I'm glad that you all are willing to pay more taxes.
All right, so moving from healthcare to public health, this is a topic that has been discussed by virtually everybody on this stage by now, so we may as well ask a question about it, the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis is crippling West Virginia. A recent study from the American Enterprise Institute ranked West Virginia first in the country for total per capita costs, estimating that the opioid crisis costs our state $8 billion a year. As for the cost of human life, in 2016, the Center for Disease Control found that West Virginia has also the highest rate of per capita drug overdose deaths in the country, which is a 33% increase over the next highest state, which is Ohio. What role does the West Virginia legislature still have in addressing the opioid crisis? If elected or re-elected, what steps will you take to address it?
Just down the line, we'll start with John.
Can I get that other mic? This is the one that was acting up on.
Yeah, we may just have to have one mic that everybody passes. That might be the simplest. The other two will be off.
Well, I think, in my time in the legislature, I think the legislature has approached it perhaps from a poor angle, and that is simply to increase penalties. So the thinking being that if you increase these penalties, people are going to hear about them and they're not going to consume drugs or deal drugs anymore. I don't think that the guys in Detroit were watching the live feed of the West Virginia legislature and said, oh my goodness, they just raised the penalties in West Virginia. We can't deal drugs down there anymore. I don't think that's the way it works. And I think you're going to have a lot of drug mules who are addicted to these drugs, and that's the only choice they have, and you're going to punish them. And they need to be given a hand. They need to be given a help up, and that's what we need to do. I'll tell you one step to fixing this problem. Barbara said it earlier, West Virginia has the highest percentage of people on workers' comp. The biggest injury with that is back injuries. What gets prescribed when you have a back injury? Highly chemically engineered opioids. I think medical cannabis and expanding the law that we passed 2 years ago, I think that that is absolutely key in the attacking plan in solving this crisis.
To look at the opioid crisis, first we need to take off our blinders. And we need to look beyond the person that has the addiction. More beds, it's not help. What do you do once they finish their treatment? You put them right back in the same communities that they came from. This is why we need to build small, safe neighborhoods through affordable housing. We need to look not only to help the person that has the addiction, but also their families. There's innocent children that's caught up in this. We are their community. We must take a stand. We must educate ourselves. Thank you.
Well, I think Delegate Williams hit the nail on the head when he talked about the approach that the current legislature has been following, focusing on punishment rather than treatment. And one of the things that I keep hearing in the community drug addiction group that I serve on is there are not enough treatment centers, and there are waiting lists for treatment. And one of the things that I worked with in the legislature with the late delegate from Preston County, Tony Lewis, was trying to get some of these hospitals that they've been trying to close converted into treatment centers. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at.
Like Shane said, we're at the center of the opioid epidemic right here in West Virginia. We've got more people dying here than in any other state. And this didn't just happen overnight. Millions and millions of pain pills got shipped to these small pharmacies for years while the legislature and the Board of Pharmacy did nothing. And we haven't seen anything significant coming out of the legislature, even in the last couple of years, because it simply hasn't been a priority. And I think in order to address this, we need to attack it from many different angles. There's definitely a law enforcement aspect to it, but we also need to invest in education, and we need large investments in treatment. And there are some great local efforts going on. Here in Mon County, there's an organization called Drive Mon County that's doing a lot to get information out where it needs to get in order to provide resources that are needed at the local level. So one thing that the legislature can do that doesn't even cost money is to support those local efforts.
want to talk about an aspect of the opioid crisis that I'm really worried about, and that is the impact on children. We know that the number of children taken into custody of the state has increased by more than 50%. So the number used to be around 4,000 and is now over 6,500. Right now, there are 40,000 open CPS cases, which out of 350,000 kids. And those children that get yanked from their homes, from the place they love, they're being neglected. Sometimes they go to their grandparents, sometimes they go to their great-grandparents. We don't give them the financial support that they need to take care of these children. Most kids, it's a very traumatic thing to be taken out of your home. It's even more traumatic if you don't, if that placement doesn't work out. We are going to have a whole generation of problems of kids that are angry at us, that are not going to be in the workforce. They're either going to be dead, addicted, in prison, a lot of them. And we have some really huge future problems, and it did happen pretty quick. It was like 5 or 10 years and it spiraled, and we need to be thinking about treatment, but also how are we going to handle these kids that have been neglected.
Yes, that's probably the best idea.
What, here we go. Oh, this one was pretty good.
Okay. Okay, we're on now. The oxycodone problem is not a local problem, it's a statewide problem. It doesn't know age groups either. And it doesn't know financial standing either. It's a problem that we have that's universal. It's from the person has the least amount of money to the people who have the most amount of money. I work in the trenches as an EMT, and we see people from every age group. We see financial people that are business people. Within the last 2 weeks, we've had a couple overdoses that affected businessmen that were, taking $1 million a year probably, that died from fentanyl heroin overdoses. It's a universal problem, and the oxycodone leads to stronger drugs. So we need to nip this in the bud. The enforcement part of it is very important. If there's no penalty for bringing those drugs in the state of West Virginia, that they're going to continue to do it. There's profit in it, and that's what it's all about, is profit. Pharmacies started 600,000 pills to one pharmacy in 6 months. That's outrageous when you only have 500 or 600 people in that community. We got to work at it from multi-standpoints. Thank you.
And I don't know if I said my name earlier, Cindy Fritsch. I have a tendency not to mention my name. 3 to 4 years ago in the legislature, we were passing a lot of enforcement legislation. It's important to keep the drugs out of West Virginia. But in the past couple of years, we've done a lot for treatment and education. As I said, last year my bill created the Office of Drug Control Policy. It dealt with education and treatment. Last year we funded treatment beds. The grants have been awarded. This year, towards the end of the session, we added $10 million for the Office of Drug Control Policy for this current fiscal year. We made naloxone legal several years ago for West Virginia. Not all states do that. You can bring someone back to life. And in the governor's bill that just passed, there's going to be teams to get people who've OD'd and had naloxone administered, get them to treatment. And there's been a waiver from the federal government so that if EMS does administer naloxone, they will be reimbursed. And if they refer to treatment, they'll be reimbursed. Prior, EMS wasn't getting reimbursed unless they put them in the truck and took them to the hospital. West Virginia is also one of the only states, maybe the only state, where the Attorney General has no ability to go after these drug rings and break them up. He has no prosecutorial powers. Maybe that's something that needs to be considered as well, because these drugs should not be here. Not everyone got a prescription drug. We're in a college town. There's plenty of young people who are heroin addicts, and they never had a problem where they saw a doctor. And it's unfortunate that anyone has this problem, and shame on those drug companies, and shame on any bad doctor that's overprescribing. We passed a bill this year so that a doctor can only prescribe 7 days. How many states have done that? And if you go to the emergency room, only 3 to 4 days. So we're trying everything we can. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So, and just as a clarification, we only have unfortunately 60 seconds per candidate, just to add that clarification for future responses. Since this has been discussed, so we'll move on to this question. There is widespread and bipartisan support for both medical and recreational cannabis in West Virginia. 3 states that border us, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, have passed medical cannabis legislation. Washington, D.C. has legalized it for both medical and recreational use. Where do you stand on this issue? Describe your support or opposition to both medical and recreational marijuana.
And Danielle?
Yes. Danielle Walker. I support medical and recreation cannabis. This could be the boom that we need in West Virginia. This is going to increase our economy. We grow cannabis here. We distribute here. We bring jobs here. All of our coal miners that are no longer working, our oil and gas industry people that are no longer working will now have jobs. But what about the ill? What about the disabled? Have you seen a child have a seizure? A child with autism have a meltdown? Do you know the life change that this would bring to a family? We need cannabis in our mountain state. This is going to be our lifeline. This is going to help rebuild our economy.
I fully support medical marijuana and also decriminalization. We had a bill last year that we passed for medical marijuana, and we needed some clarification this year. The bill died on the last day in the House, and I have to say that it was probably the most disgusting political spectacle that I have ever seen, the way that bill was killed. It was in the clerk's office, and the Speaker of the House refused to bring it to the floor. And so I think it's something we need, as several of the other folks at the table have mentioned. Decriminalization can possibly be a revenue booster for the state. And so with that said, I fully support both.
I think what Rodney mentioned, what happened on the last day of the session, is really a crime. We have medical marijuana in West Virginia, and there were some fixes that were needed in order to make the system more compassionate and in order to open up the system better to the free market. And those died due to Republican opposition, and we need those changes to be made. Medical marijuana is the compassionate thing to do, and studies have also shown that it can help to some degree to cut down on opioid use. So in terms of all the many different things that we need to do to address the opioid crisis, this is one tool that we have. Recreational cannabis is also something that I would support. I think at this point with West Virginia's economy, we need to look at all options for diversifying our economy and all options for finding new revenue streams. And we know from what's happened in other states where it's been legalized that it has opened up millions and millions of dollars in new revenue. So I'm supportive of both.
I am totally in support of medical marijuana, and I also think we need to be doing research on developing strains and figuring out what can help. I'm open to recreational. I'm certainly open to decriminalizing. There's so many parallels with prohibition and to now. But I think with a 60-day session, what we really need to focus on first is making sure that our medical marijuana regulation works. And right now, it is not working. It needed this fix. It was a technical fix primarily, and it's really unfortunate we didn't get it done because it's going to hold us back. But I support both.
Okay. Okay, I think we're on now. I'm going to be a rare thing for a Republican. I'm going to say that as a cancer survivor, I support the medical use of marijuana. And I've read several studies that say that it can be of a benefit, not only for the pain that's involved in cancer treatment and people who are trying to survive and have a living life where they get around, do things, but also from the aspects that some cancers do react to the cannabis oil. I am not a supporter of openly allowing and legalizing marijuana. I lived through the 60s and the 70s, and I've seen some of the effects of marijuana, and I just don't believe we need to go back to that aspect of marijuana. But I will support the medical portion of it.
And I think marijuana might be stronger than the marijuana of the 60s. I do not support recreational marijuana. Employers in the state are having a hard enough time finding employees who can pass a drug test. There's a lot of restrictions that you'll have when you have a medical marijuana card as well. I would support CBD or cannabidiol, something that doesn't have the THC levels in it that gets someone high, but I did vote against the medical marijuana. That was cemented when there were amendments to that bill last year to decrease the registration and licensing fees. So in this year's budget, we had to put like $29 million extra into the budget to subsidize the medical marijuana. And future years, there will be thousands of dollars that the taxpayers have to spend to fund and subsidize the medical marijuana program. And in my personal experience, people in my life who are heroin addicts started on marijuana. So.
Maybe I jumped the gun because I've talked about both these issues, but I'm most obviously in support of medical marijuana. It's something I spoke in favor of on the House floor, worked some on the bill. I think it's the compassionate thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. And we certainly do need to go back and we need to fix the law so that it's a law that serves people so that they can actually have access to medical cannabis. Now, in terms of recreational, I always thought maybe we need to think about it, maybe we need to look at it, but at this point, I'm not sure what more evidence that we need. We see revenue surpluses in states that have legalized it. We see a fall in opioid usage, not just in states who have legalized medical, but who have legalized recreational as well. You know, to my knowledge, there's not an organization called Mothers Against High Driving. There's Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Alcohol, in my view, is 10 times worse than marijuana. I've never seen people who are high start a fight. They eat Cheetos and watch television. let's be real about it. Seriously, let's be honest about it and have an honest conversation that it's past time to do this because of the revenue benefits that it could provide for our state.
Okay, so moving on from health issues, focusing more on the economy. West Virginia in recent legislative sessions became a right-to-work state. Supporters of this legislation argue that these laws create jobs and lower the unemployment rate. Opponents of this legislation argue that it weakens labor unions and harms collective bargaining. This June, Kanawha Circuit Judge Jennifer Bailey will announce a ruling as to whether or not this law is deemed constitutional. If elected, what position will you take on this legislation and why?
Well, I, as a son of a coal miner who was an active member of the UMWA, and with the support from these labor unions, I would definitely support a repeal of the right to work law, and I hope the legislature can muster a majority to do that.
I mentioned my mom being a teacher. She was a union member. I grew up in a union home. I understand how important unions are to level the playing field and to make sure that working people get treated fairly and that they have fair wages and fair benefits. I've been endorsed by the AFL-CIO, by the mine workers, by the teachers unions, the laborers, and other unions. Union issues are very important to me, so my position on this is very clear. I would vote to overturn the right to work law.
Well, I voted against it. I think right to work is almost evil. I think that it's the right to work for less and that it's very hard to negotiate with one person, but several people together can say, you know, this is not enough to live on and we need more fairness at our workplace. So I'm very opposed to right to work. I would, in a heartbeat, I would vote to repeal it, and I hope we can turn the direction around of this legislature to be more favorable to working class people.
Right to work is a very difficult subject. I think some of the folks here on this panel have some pretty determined ideas. Myself, as a conservative and a Republican, would be willing to listen to both sides of that subject. And if you could prove to me that this state would be better off without right to work, I'd vote for that. But the most important thing is prevailing wage. That's what we need back. If we want to control the labor and keep a life-sustaining wage for our workers, whether you're union or non-union, you need a prevailing wage, a wage that you're guaranteed when you go out there and give your labor. I think that hurt the labor in West Virginia more than the right to work has. I'd like to hear both sides of that argument, and if you can prove to me that this state of West Virginia doesn't need right to work, I'd vote against it. I would vote to repeal it.
Well, tonight we're here with the League of Women Voters and the Mountaineers for Progress, sitting in a union hall for the plumbers and pipe fitters. And I never campaigned on right to work, but I did vote for it on the House floor. I voted for right to work. We don't know what it's going to do for our state and our economy, since a judge in Kanawha County is preventing it from going through. So I did vote for it. And I don't know exactly, there's been no evidence. We haven't seen the evidence because it hasn't been able to work its way out here. So I don't have any evidence to base it on in West Virginia that it's a problem yet.
Just to give a rundown to remind everyone about right to work. Right to work is telling a union, a private entity, that it is compelled to provide a service to someone who hasn't paid for it. I cannot imagine the colleagues that I serve with who are in the majority party in Charleston advocating for another kind of company being forced to provide a service to a consumer who didn't pay for it. It's a union busting effort in the state of Battle of Blair Mountain, of the coal mine wars. I think it's a shame, a real crying shame, that West Virginia is now a right-to-work state, and I would hope that anyone who cares at all about unions, about organized labor, I hope that anyone would fight like heck to get that bill, that law overturned.
Last, Danielle Walker. Right to work has no home here. It doesn't belong here. West Virginia was built by unions. I have been endorsed by several unions. I see these people work. I see these people stand up for what they believe in. 55 Strong may have been started by the teachers, but every union was behind them. This is how we take a stand. This is how we rebuild West Virginia. So, right to work, you are repelled.
Okay, moving on to social issues here. This November, West Virginia voters will decide to support or oppose Amendment 1. If ratified by the voters, this amendment to the state's constitution would eliminate all protections for individuals seeking abortions in the state of West Virginia. Describe your position on both this proposed amendment as well as a woman's right to choose.
Well, I think it's a shame that the Republicans pushed this through to put it on the ballot in November. I think this was simply an effort to put an issue on the ballot, no matter how divisive it was, in order to increase Republican turnout. And I think doing something like that on such an important issue like a women's right to choose is really a shame. My understanding of that amendment, if it passes, is that it will be the first amendment that will actually take rights away from people, rather than amendments that we have historically made in the United States that give people rights, that enshrine those rights in the Constitution. I think that's a step backwards. I think it's the wrong direction, and I don't support it.
I voted against it in the legislature, and I think it is a very dangerous amendment. in part because of what Evan said. The first time we're taking away individual rights from people, individual rights to be free from governmental interference in a decision that is life-changing. And what it says is no constitutional right to abortion. And what some people are hoping is that Roe v. Wade will be overturned and then there will be nothing left in West Virginia. And in West Virginia, our state Supreme Court said that we have a different language in our Constitution, stronger language to protect people, and the word safety is in there, to protect our safety, and stronger individual rights. And it also says, they also said that you have a right to funding because you can't discriminate between one medical procedure and another one. So this is just acting as if there is no exception whatsoever where somebody could make a decision like that. And there are always exceptions to every rule.
All right, I'm not going to be ashamed of the fact that I'm pro-life. Well, everybody's up to their opinion. Someone in the room is definitely not pro-life. But when you go that slippery step and you're saying it's okay to abort, how far is it away from the fact that you legally can take somebody's life if you're 70 years old and you got cancer? Or hey, in our society we have to deal with that. It's coming, that your right to die is just as bad as abortion. And I feel both ways. I'm on the older side of the fact that someday there may be panels that decide where you live or die. Do you think that can't happen? Well, it may.
Audience, as a reminder, this is a time for us to listen. Thank you.
But I definitely support right to life. I'm against abortion. Am I against someone having a choice? I'm going to have to think about that. But under medical conditions, I will support the fact that a woman should be able to have an abortion to save her life, and I would support that.
Okay, this constitutional amendment that'll be on the ballot makes the Constitution abortion neutral. It doesn't take away anyone's rights. And currently state code protects a woman if they can have an abortion if their life is threatened, etc. So it makes the Constitution abortion neutral. And like the gentleman sitting next to me, I am pro-life as well.
SDR 12, for lack of a better term, reeked of political posturing from the very start. In the House's Committee on the Judiciary, there was an amendment to move the vote on SDR 12 up to the primary. Well, if you have such a sincerely held belief about this, why wait till November? Move it up to May. Voted down. There were talks of a similar amendment being made on the House floor, but it lacked the vote, so it wasn't introduced. This is on the ballot to turn out voters for one party. That's the main reason why this was introduced. And it's really a shame that we've put politics above the health of women. Women in our state, if this thing passes, they could be on the operating table, and if that pregnancy is going to kill them, in the state of West Virginia, that doctor's just going to have to let them die. That's not the state that I want to live in, not for my mother, not for my sisters, not for my girlfriend. That's not my West Virginia, and I hope that it's not yours.
Pardon me, this is an emotional subject. I am pro-choice. And I feel if I'm not at the table, then women are on the menu. And you will not eat me alive. This was a tactic because there's a blue wave coming and there's a lot of people that's going to be drowned in it. And that time is now. You do not put a doctor, you do not put legislators to decide if I live or if I die. Those days are over with. I have a right and I have a choice. What happens with my body is between me and my maker. It's not between me and a Republican.
I voted against this amendment on the House floor. It offers no protection or exception, no exception for rape or incest or to save the life of the mother. But let me also say that I'm a Roman Catholic. My church is opposed to abortion. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus, an organization that actively opposes abortion. But in this case, I believe that an abortion is the most difficult decision that a woman has to make. But that decision has to be between her and her doctor, her family, or her priest or minister if she chooses to involve them. The state has no business dictating this issue. The decision has to be left to the person involved.
All right, just one more friendly reminder to the audience. I understand there are certain issues that people are more charged up about, but I do want to encourage us to be quiet and listen to the candidates as opposed to creating, not a ruckus, that's not the appropriate word, but anyway. So we have one more prepared question, and we're doing pretty well on time. We will have an opportunity to get to one, maybe a couple audience questions. So before we get to our last question, we're just going to do a last call. If you've done a question on an index card, please hold it up, and we have Micah, and I think Vicky, and a few others will go around and collect them. I wish we had time to get to everything. Like I said, we can't really be here until 11 as much as we may want to. But go ahead and hold them up. Somebody will come and collect them, and then we'll get to as many as we can. Okay, and our last question here talks about the West Virginia State Code. Currently, the West Virginia State Code does not provide employment, housing, or public accommodation protections to members of the LGBTQ community. Currently, 10 West Virginia cities have passed non-discrimination ordinances to provide those protections, but only on a municipal level. Would you support legislation to protect LGBTQ individuals from discrimination related to housing, employment, and public accommodations? Why or why not?
I think that is a no-brainer. I think the state that was formed to end discrimination against Black people should not say it is okay in employment, or well, it's to end slavery. Let's make it accurate. To end slavery should not say it is okay to discriminate people, that you could deny somebody a house, you could deny somebody a job, you could not let them sit at a restaurant counter or go to your restaurant. We should not be the state. We should be the state that said we will not tolerate that. And in fact, there is a really interesting Supreme Court decision that says in West Virginia, discrimination is akin to treason. And that's what I think. I think it's law. I have sponsored this legislation for years, and that's part of my Fighting for Fairness platform. And it's time that West Virginia got into the modern era.
Another very difficult question, but it's a pretty easy answer. I don't believe that we should support discrimination in any way, shape, or form, whether you're Black, white, you're American Indian, you're male, you're female. I don't think that should come into play for housing. I don't think that should come into play for a job. I think you should have merits for what you are, and not for what somebody else believes you are. So discrimination does not have a place in my daily life, and I would hope it wouldn't have a place in our political system.
I don't support discrimination either. I am a little wary of this particular special treatment that could lead to lawsuits, because at this moment, I'm not sure how you prove that you were denied a job because you're a homosexual, or that you were denied housing because you're a homosexual. I have a lot of questions about this. I'm still not comfortable with it.
I've been a sponsor on ENDA bills in my past two sessions, so this is something that's very important to me. Looking at it, I think that if you're someone who wants to participate in commerce at the local level, whether that's having a business and employing people or having a rental property and renting it out to people, you should adhere to societal norms. And I think a societal norm is that we don't discriminate against people based on something that has nothing to do with our own lives. Nothing at all. And I think it's really shameful that we haven't been able to get this passed yet to make our friends in the LGBTQ community a protected class. It's really a crying shame.
Another subject that's dear to my heart, as today is National Give Out Day. My oldest son is gay, and I love him, and I love everyone in that community. How do you prove it? How did you prove when black people were being oppressed? How did you approve when women were being oppressed? How did you approve when you had to be a certain financial status? Oh, the American dream has come a great journey. So there is ways that we can prove it. And you put this scientist in there, and you put this everyday person in there, and we're gonna fight for rights. No discrimination. Hate has no home here.
Yeah, I fully support the extension of protections to all classes of people, and I have been co-sponsor of legislation in the legislature to do that.
One of the things I love about Monongalia County is how diverse it is. And I think just even looking across this room, I see people of different religions, different races, different sexual orientations, and I think that's a wonderful thing about living here. I've spent time campaigning and meeting people in churches, at a synagogue, at the Islamic Center, and I've talked to a wide diversity of people. I'm happy with what cities have done across West Virginia with non-discrimination ordinances, but I think those are under threat unless the state takes action to make it statewide. So I am definitely in support of a statewide non-discrimination ordinance so that people don't get fired or kicked out of their homes due to their orientation.
Okay, so that concludes our prepared questions, and we're doing pretty well on time. Micah's been up here. I'm going to give the microphone to Micah. He's been up here shuffling through cards for the last 10 minutes. So I'll let him explain how we're going to address the audience portion, or the part where we have the questions from the audience.
Okay, thank you everyone. Just for full disclosure, we collected everybody's cards. The way that we sorted them was we had a number of questions that were asked by multiple people in this room. So if there was a question that we got 6 similar questions, that one went first, because obviously more than one of you would like to know that. If your question was related to something that was already asked and answered, even if it wasn't the specific thing, like if we talked about healthcare or cannabis or something like that, we're not going to ask that because it's basically already been covered. And we are going to give the candidates an opportunity when it's over to stay and talk. So if you have specific questions for specific candidates, you can do that at the end. Is that fair enough? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Micah.
Do you want to explain that?
Yes. So in the interest of time as well, what we're going to do is we're going to have, I guess you could call it sort of a lightning round in a sense, just to make sure we get to as many questions as possible. So for these responses, we will pose the question to all 7 candidates, and we will allow 30 seconds for a response. And Julia is our timekeeper, so she'll let you know when you have 15 seconds and then when time's up. Okay. So the first question here says, please explain how you plan to move beyond fossil fuels and diversify our West Virginia economy, especially for coal miners and others who need to transition. Where did we end before?
Roger.
Moving beyond the coal years that West Virginia thrived on, we do have an opportunity with the gas and the oil that we're getting from the ground right now. We just have to be very educated on how we tax that. Because once it's going to be just like the coal. We're going to have to find another alternative for us to make our living on and keep our legislation and our tax system solvent. So we need to move forward with the gas and oil industry, and then we're going to have to maybe go into solar or some other product.
Well, natural gas is a fossil fuel, but I'm hoping that West Virginia's budget will benefit from future natural gas and hopefully downstream industries so that we can keep that benefit in our state and have additional jobs. Our economy is incredibly challenged and we need to do what we can to help create jobs so we can fund all these programs everyone wants in the budget. And we're not competing very well, frankly, with Ohio and Pennsylvania right now with natural gas. I'm not willing to vote for forced pooling to make that a possibility, but there's I will still support the energy and jobs. Thank you.
I think we kind of keyhole ourselves a little too much, right? I mean, it used to be West Virginia is a coal state, and then that sort of turned into West Virginia is an extraction state, and then now when we talk about jobs we have to bring here, we sort of keep it within energy. What are we going to do energy-wise? I don't want to keyhole ourselves simply to energy. I think there's a lot of job opportunities in hemp production. I think tech companies, those are the things that are really blowing up. If you see all the jobs that are out on the West Coast with tech companies, I think we need to incentivize and have creative ways to bring tech manufacturing jobs. One manufacturing job supports 6.5 other jobs in the economy. That's a wonderful statistic, and it's one that we should aspire to take advantage of.
Well, first, we have a lot of cleanup to do. So we need to change those regulations so we can have tourism back in our state. This is a beautiful state. And it's time that we open up those doors so other people can see almost heaven, West Virginia. And that will boost our economy. That will give our children a sense of pride. That will bring back family into the that will bring family back to our communities. And that will give us hope.
I think we can't turn away from renewable energy, and I think there are probably a lot of unemployed coal miners who would be able to install solar panels or wind turbines, maybe even manufacturing those items if we can get the manufacturers located here in West Virginia. We had a bill last year in the legislature that sought to remove the tax credits we have in place for renewable energy. Somebody was thinking that, well, we can help coal by doing away with these tax credits. That's a wrong idea.
Through my consulting company, I work on renewable energy issues and how we could attract those businesses to West Virginia. And last year, I gave a presentation at the Governor's Energy Summit, talked about solar opportunities in West Virginia. There's a lot here. After my presentation, the chief of staff of the governor got up there to give a speech, and he said that the governor supports all types of energy, coal and gas. And that's the type of thinking that's holding us back. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs being created across the country in solar, in wind, and energy efficiency. And the only reason they're not coming to West Virginia is because we have bad policies and we've got state leaders who are keeping them out. So we need to decide that we're going to look forward and create a 21st century economy instead of trying to make our future economy look like our past.
I look forward to having new people with new ideas. We placed all of our eggs in one basket for far too long. And I agree with Evan and Rodney and John and Danielle that we need to diversify our economy. We are so behind the curve. There are so many more new jobs in solar energy in the rest of the country, like Evan said. I mean, just thousands and thousands of jobs into different kinds of alternative energy. And my time's up.
All right, if we can pass the microphone back up, we'll just do the same order we did before.
So the next question here, we had a pretty common theme about taxes, which were already discussed today. This question says, who will represent the taxpayers and how will you be a good steward of our tax dollars?
Well, I've been trying to be a good steward of the taxpayers. At the beginning of this past session, I was highly critical during the Finance Committee of the governor's increased spending proposals to put new line items in the budget for various things after we had been under such austerity measures trying to cut and piece together budgets and we increased the cigarette tax. But at any rate, because I was so fiscally conservative and accountable, we were able to give pay raises to state employees and teachers, and I'll continue to try to be fiscally responsible.
If you want to look for waste, fraud, and abuse in the government of the state of West Virginia, look no further than West Virginia State Supreme Court of Appeals. I don't know if you've been following any of what's been going on. We have an office that was renovated for $500,000. Personal cars being bought for driving to and fro work and going on out-of-state trips with those cars. And you have the opportunity in November, I believe it's Amendment 2, which would make normal the way things work in West Virginia, which would be to give the legislature the power of the purse over the judiciary. Most other states do it. It's about time we do it in ours.
How would I represent the taxpayers? We're going to be frugal, but we're going to be frugal in the right areas. We waste money on the wrong things. And we allow these big companies to give us pennies. And it's time that we put our educators first, our roads first, the education first. All these coal miners that's out of work, we put them first. We provide more CTEs. This is how I represent you and your tax dollars.
I think we need to watch out for tax dollars, make sure we spend our tax money on the things that we want and need, health, education, and transportation.
I think it's important to remember that tax dollars are spent as an investment in West Virginia. They should not just go in a black hole, but the reason we pay taxes is because we want good roads and because we need public safety and we want clean drinking water and things like that. So these are investments in West Virginia's future. That being said, we need to be careful about how we spend them, and one of the most important roles that the legislature plays is oversight and accountability, and putting in the work to ask the hard questions from the agency heads and others to make sure that the dollars are spent where they should be spent.
One of the ways I think we can exercise more oversight is looking at tax breaks and putting them in the budget so that all of us can see them. When you give a corporation a tax break, it's just like a line item for other expenditures. And we should have a way that we can see and that we can measure, is that expenditure for a tax break? And especially it's for jobs. There's an organization called Good Jobs First. We need to know if we are giving a company some kind of a benefit for creating jobs, that tax break is actually bringing good jobs with benefits.
Financial responsibility is the responsibility of the Senate and legislature of the state of West Virginia, and having a good sustainable budget is part of that. What they go into every session knowing is where they have to fund. There's very few added items at the end of each session. Why don't we wait until the last few weeks or last few days of the session to come up with a budget? That should be one of the things that should be pretty easy for them. They know how much money they have coming in, they know how many bills they have, and they know what they need to spend the money on. The new things are the ones they should be arguing about. So I really think that financial responsibility is to know how much money you have and to use it wisely.
Okay, I believe we're going to have time for 2 more questions from the audience, plus the 30-second closing statements from the candidates. This one is an issue of local concern, and it talks about higher education. WVU's budget, meaning the appropriation it receives from the state, is regularly on the chopping block. How would you support our state's flagship university and the constituents that work there?
Well, I've supported those people that work there. There was a bumping seniority bill 2 sessions ago that I voted against. That's going to hurt a lot of working people who work at WVU. But in terms of protecting funding for WVU, I spoke out against cuts that it was seeing in the last session, and I spoke out against an amendment this time that would have seen those cuts been made. For every single dollar that's given to WVU out of state funds, it produces 10 more within our local economy. I'm not a financial planner, but it seems to me that we should double down on those investments, not divest and take away that potential money in the future.
How do we protect WVU? Interesting. Very interesting. Where's the mascot of this whole state, where we are all Mountaineers? Yet, we let people from other states come in and just rip us apart. Accountability, solidarity, unity. We have to start thinking outside of the box. When they come with something, we have to be ready. It's time to be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah, the problem with the university, with WVU, has then been the bare bones budgets that have been passed the last 3 or 4 years. And the first thing that has been cut is education. And what we've mentioned time and time again at this table is, the need for more revenue, so we get beyond passing the same budget we passed last year and the same budget to pass the year before. And so we've got to start looking at the revenue picture, prevent further cuts to WVU.
Well, one thing we can do to support the people that work at WVU is fix PEIA. So that's something that's very important for so many people around the state. I had mentioned that public education is my top priority, and that goes not just for K through 12, but for WVU as well. We want to provide the best educational opportunities for our kids, and if they choose to go to college, WVU is a great option for them. It's an economic engine for our community, and we, as representatives of this county, need to represent WVU in the legislature and make sure we get our fair share of resources up here.
One of the things I think we have to do is figuring out what fair share means. I think we are lucky to live in a community that has our top research facility. And because it is large, there is a lot of jealousy and resentment. And so people think if you whack off 30 million, it won't mean that much in a much, much larger budget. So I think we have to all be like mama bears and defend our babies.
Very proud to be a West Virginian, very proud of West Virginia University, and I'm really glad that the forefathers of West Virginia decided to put here in Montague County in the city of Morgantown. I think we were like a coin toss between that and the prison for Moundsville. So we're pretty fortunate there. Hopefully it continues to be healthy and grow. My children are both graduates of West Virginia University, and I'm very proud of them going there. I'm very, very proud of the school, and I think our legislature should continue to support them financially.
Well, the biggest mama bear in support of WVU's funding is sitting at this table, and I have to say, on the Finance Committee and elsewhere, it's been me. I've worn out legislators, delegates and senators, and the Finance Committee on this issue. I've been on the Finance Committee for 4 years, and WVU, and the governor targeted WVU recently. WVU, they just rely on a small percentage from the state for their budget. That helps put them on the chopping block, unfortunately. But I made sure that pay raises kept up with for the state employees and WVU employees, kept up with the percentage that the teachers got. And as far as budgeting and passing a budget towards the end of the session, and this is the first time that anyone can remember that we passed a budget at the end of the session, didn't go into an extended session. We rely on the governor for his revenue estimates, and we have to wait to see what bills pass the legislature. Bills might cost money. We have to account for that in the budget. So we can't do the budget at the beginning of the session. We have to wait towards the end. And I sponsor the auditor's transparency bill, and that will help us keep up on the road funding and other things, accountability and transparency in government funding.
Okay, and then final question before closing statements. Would you be supportive of allowing refugees from the Middle East states currently experiencing civil war to settle in West Virginia? We're on Danielle.
Okay, repeat the question, I'm sorry. We were trying to decide who was it, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Would you be supportive of allowing refugees from the Middle East states currently experiencing civil war to settle in West Virginia?
Yes, I would be supportive. It is a human thing to do. Everyone needs a home, and West Virginia is so inviting. Who am I to shut the doors down? We open them. That's another part of being a Mountaineer. We welcome people into our homes. This state is our home. We are diverse. We are growing every day. And it's time that it's not just Morgantown. It's all 55 counties.
I certainly support what Danielle just said. We need to have an open door for everyone that wants to live here.
There are people in some of these war-torn countries that are going through unimaginable suffering. And I think we need to do the compassionate thing. I think we need to be welcoming and generous. And if people go through the process and are able to integrate into the United States, we should welcome them here to our community.
I think we need to look at history. I think we need to remember history when there was a time when it was thought to be okay to exterminate Jewish people, and when they couldn't find a safe harbor anywhere, and 6 million, 8 million Jewish people died. Just think how those families feel. They're running from one country to the next. If they go through the process, because nobody wants a terrorist here, obviously, we have a process designed to prevent that. I think West Virginia should be welcoming. I think we should be a welcoming state.
That's a perfect question for the people of Montague County. I think that Montague County is probably the most diverse county in the state of West Virginia. Look around our campus, look at all the different nationalities are represented. I don't hear of or see very many times when those folks are discriminated against. I think we in Montague County have done a very good job of disseminating them into our society. I think in some of the rural areas it may be more difficult to get them to accept that, but I believe if they're here legally and they need a place to live, they ought to be able to live where they want. That gets back to that one question we were asked on diversity earlier. If you could answer that positive, you got to answer this one positive as well. I think they'd be welcome here, in my opinion.
I'd say that Mon County is not the only area where these refugees are being resettled. Catholic Charities are resettling refugees in other parts of the state as well. But I believe that the governor should be notified when refugees from some countries are being resettled here, so that Homeland Security can be aware of it. Some countries are on. The governor should be notified, that's all.
I don't think that the American dream and the opportunity which we're afforded here is mine and mine alone to hoard. I think it's something that if we want to be charitable, if we want to look after other people, it should be afforded to everyone. Societies look down on people of a variety of backgrounds throughout the course of history. And I think we need to come to grips with the fact that diversity is not a bad thing. Diversity is a wonderful thing.
Okay, that's all the audience questions that we have time for tonight. Final wrap up, candidates, 30 seconds, simple question. Why should we support you in May and or November? We'll just work down the line. We'll start with Rodney.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for being here tonight. I have had some difficulty during this first term. Being a freshman delegate in the minority party has been a struggle. I'm somewhat excuse me. But the most rewarding thing that happened was that I got a bill passed, Historic Preservation Tax Credit. And that bill was featured on the front page of the Charleston newspaper, and said that this bill will create jobs and foster economic development. And that's something that we all promised to do when we went to Charleston. I felt very proud about that. And I asked for another term. Thank you.
I don't think I've mentioned since the beginning that my name is Evan Hansen, and I'm asking for your vote. If you want to send someone who's a scientist and a small business owner to Charleston, if you think that's valuable experience, then give me a vote. If you want to send someone down there who's made a career out of thinking about how to diversify West Virginia's economy in a way that'll grow jobs and protect the environment at the same time, give me a vote. If you think we need to invest more in our public education and fix our roads and address the opioid epidemic, and somebody who's going to work hard every day during that session, then I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you all again, and thank you to the Mountaineers for Progress and League of Women Voters. I would like you to vote for me. My name is Barbara Evans Fleischauer, because I think I am somebody that works on problems. I really want to continue to work on children's issues. I worked really hard on autism. We have some great legislation in this state. I'm very, very worried about these children affected by the opioid crisis. I want to make sure that the bond really works, and I want to go and represent you. Thank you for having confidence in me.
Thank you for the opportunity to come out tonight and speaking to you. We have a lot of challenging things ahead of us in the state of West Virginia. A lot of them have been discussed tonight. A lot of them have been on the table for many years, whether it's been the Democratic Party in charge of what's going down or the Republicans. Be nice if just we get some people to go down there and we'll work together and reach across the aisle somewhat, somehow. Somewhere in this United States of America, it's going to have to start somewhere sooner or later that the Republicans and Democrats can work together. And I'd like to be one of those ones that can get down and make it happen.
I'm Cindy Fretch. I want to make West Virginia a place where our children can receive a good education and have the opportunities available to them to remain in the state, provide for their families, and retire in a healthy, safe community. When I started in office, we did not have a drug epidemic like we do now, but my heart has been totally in trying to deal with this drug epidemic because it's devastating families and destroying our economy. I can't even believe what's happening to our state. Now, we have not cut public education, which I keep hearing all over the place. There's less students in West Virginia, unfortunately, because of the challenges to the economy. We have a funding formula. When there's less students, there's less funding to the schools. We spend thousands of dollars every year to fund a teacher's retirement system that was the worst funded retirement system in the country. And several years ago, we bankrolled that, and we continue to. We were able to give pay raises because of fiscal responsibility in the past several years. And I would like to continue serving and solving the drug epidemic and other problems that pop their heads up.
Yeah, I'm kind of a straight shooter, and I hope that's been made evident to you. If you'd like to talk about any of the issues that I've talked about, we'd be more than happy to talk to you about them afterwards. But every single day that I'm under the dome in the Capitol, the people of Montague County, my people here back home, are at the forefront of my mind. I will always be a fighter for you. I take very seriously the term delegate. You are delegating to me the issues that you would like me to work on. And I do that every single day for 60 days, and I relish in it, and I enjoy it, and I hope that I've done right by you, and I hope that you'll have me for another term. Thank you.
I have a big mouth, but I don't think I need to.
Here, I'll take one back.
I am Danielle Walker, and I want you to take a stand with me in rebuilding West Virginia. I am Danielle Walker. I want you to take a stand with me and provide a better education for our children, starting with our teachers. Rebuild affordable housing. And let's diminish this addiction crisis. I want you to vote for me. I want you to vote for John. I want you to vote for Rodney, Evan, and Barbara. 5 Fab of District 51, Danielle Walker.
So on that note, please join me in thanking all the candidates for being here tonight.